My name is Marguerite Adelaide Thornwood, and this is the story of how I lost everything I'd built over 37 years of marriage, only to reclaim it all with a single dusty envelope I found hidden in my mother-in-law's attic. What started as the darkest chapter of my life became the sweetest revenge I could have ever imagined. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, this story is for you. Stay with me, because what I discovered in that envelope didn't just change my life, it exposed secrets that destroyed the people who tried to destroy me. The perfect life, or so I thought. It was March 15th, 2023, when my world came crashing down. But let me take you back to where it all began. I met Harrison Thornwood in the spring of 1986 at a charity gala in Greenwich, Connecticut. He was charming, successful, and came from old money, the kind of family whose name appeared on hospital wings and museum plaques. I was a 24-year-old elementary school teacher from a middle-class family in Ohio, completely out of my depth in his world of country clubs and summer homes in Martha's Vineyard. Harrison swept me off my feet. Within 6 months, we were married in a lavish ceremony at his family's estate, a sprawling $3.5 million mansion called Thornwood Manor, with 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, and grounds that seemed to stretch endlessly. His mother, Constance Thornwood, a formidable woman with pearls permanently affixed to her neck and ice in her veins, made it clear from day one that I wasn't good enough for her son. But Harrison defended me, or so I believed. We had 3 children. Victoria, born in 1988, a brilliant girl who got into Yale just like her father. Marcus, born in 1991, who inherited his father's business acumen. And our youngest, Sophie, born in 1995, a free spirit who dreamed of being an artist. I gave up my teaching career to raise them, to create the perfect home, to be the perfect wife. For 37 years, I played my role flawlessly. I hosted dinner parties for Harrison's business associates, organized charity events, volunteered at the children's schools, and managed every detail of our household. I thought we were happy. I thought he loved me. I was a fool. The betrayal. On March 15th, 2023, I returned home early from a doctor's appointment. I'd been feeling exhausted for weeks, and my physician wanted to run some tests. As I walked through the front door of Thornwood Manor, I heard laughter coming from Harrison's study, female laughter that wasn't from any of our staff. I should have knocked. I should have announced myself. Instead, I quietly pushed open the door. There was my husband of 37 years, my Harrison, entangled with a woman who couldn't have been older than our daughter Victoria. She was perched on his desk, her blouse unbuttoned, his hands on her waist. They were so absorbed in each other that they didn't even notice me standing there for a full 10 seconds. When Harrison finally saw me, he didn't scramble to explain. He didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed, as if I were inconvenience interrupting his afternoon entertainment. "Marguerite," he said calmly, straightening his tie. "We need to talk." The woman, her name was Amber, I later learned, a 28-year-old paralegal from his firm, grabbed her things and scurried out without meeting my eyes. I stood frozen, my purse still hanging from my arm, my car keys clutched in my trembling hand. "How long?" I whispered. "Does it matter?" Harrison poured himself a scotch, his back to me. "Marguerite, we've grown apart. You must have felt it too. Answer me. How long?" He turned, and the coldness in his eyes made me realize I was looking at a stranger. 3 years. But there have been others. The word echoed in my mind like a death knell. While I was caring for his ailing mother, while I was organizing his birthday parties, while I was pretending everything was perfect, he'd been betraying me again and again. "I want a divorce," he said matter-of-factly. "My lawyer will contact you tomorrow." The nightmare began. Harrison's lawyer contacted me the very next day. His name was Gerald Pemberton, a shark in a 3-piece suit who'd built his reputation destroying wives in divorce court. The terms Harrison proposed were insulting. I would leave Thornwood Manor with a small settlement of $200,000, barely enough to buy a modest apartment, while he retained everything else: the house, the vacation properties, The investment portfolio, the art collection I'd spent decades curating, everything. But what devastated me most was the children. He wants full custody. I asked my own lawyer, Dorothy Chen, a kind woman who'd come highly recommended, but seemed overwhelmed by Pemberton's aggressive tactics. He's claiming you're unstable, Dorothy said gently, sliding a document across her desk. He's had you followed, Marguerite. He's documented every time you've seemed erratic over the past 6 months. I stared at the papers in disbelief. There were photos of me crying in my car after discovering the affair, notes about how I'd lost weight and appeared haggard, statements from Harrison's friends claiming I'd become paranoid and controlling. Even my own children had given depositions stating they were concerned about mother's mental state. They're lying, I whispered. All of them. I believe you, Dorothy said. But Harrison has resources we don't. He's spent months building this case, and with his family's connections, she didn't need to finish. I understood. In Connecticut's family courts, money talked, and Harrison had all the money. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Harrison's legal team portrayed me as an unstable, clingy wife who never contributed anything of value to the marriage. They claimed I'd manipulated Harrison into marrying me, that I'd been after his money from the beginning. They even brought up my working class background, suggesting I'd never truly fit into Harrison's world. My children, my own babies, testified against me. Victoria, cool and composed in a designer suit, stated that she'd always found me overly emotional and difficult. Marcus claimed I'd been controlling and suffocating throughout his childhood. Only Sophie seemed conflicted, but even she agreed with her siblings under her father's watchful eye. The worst part, Constance Thornwood sat in the courtroom every single day, her thin lips curved in a satisfied smile, watching me be torn apart. On August 3, 2023, Judge Harold Matthews delivered his verdict. Harrison was granted full custody of our adult children's allegiance and assets. I was awarded a settlement of $180,000, even less than initially offered, and ordered to vacate Thornwood Manor within 30 days. The house, the life I'd built, the family I'd devoted myself to, all gone. I left the courthouse that day a broken woman. I had no home, no family, no purpose. At 61 years old, I was starting over with nothing. The turning point, he moved into a small apartment in Stamford, a far cry from the mansion I'd called home. My days blurred together in a haze of grief and confusion. How had everything gone so wrong? How had I not seen this coming? Then, on September 12th, 2023, I received a phone call that changed everything. Mrs. Thornwood, this is Patricia Bailey from Evergreen Senior Living. I'm calling about Constance Thornwood. My heart sank. Despite everything I'd spent years caring for Harrison's mother, is she all right? She passed away peacefully last night, Patricia said gently. I'm so sorry for your loss. She left instructions that you were to be contacted. She wanted you to have something from her personal effects. This made no sense. Constance had despised me. Why would she leave me anything? 3 days later, I drove to the nursing home where Constance had spent her final years. Patricia, a warm woman in her 50s, led me to a small office and handed me a sealed manila envelope with my name written in Constance's spidery handwriting. She gave this to me 6 months ago, Patricia explained. She made me promise to give it to you if anything happened to her, and only to you. She was quite insistent. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a small key. The letter read, Marguerite, if you're reading this, I'm dead, which means I can finally tell you the truth. I never liked you. You were too kind, too genuine, too good for my son. But that's exactly why you didn't deserve what he did to you. 6 months ago, Harrison came to me and told me his plan. He'd been setting you up for years, preparing to divorce you and take everything. He laughed about it, Marguerite. He laughed about how he convinced the children to turn against you, how he'd manipulated the courts, how he'd make sure you'd end up with nothing. I've done terrible things in my life, but I won't let my son destroy a woman who devoted her best years to our family. In my attic at the estate, the main house, not the manner. There's a locked trunk. The key is enclosed. Inside, you'll find documents that will change everything. I should have been kinder to you. I should have protected you. This is the only amends I can make. Go to the attic. Use the key. Destroy my son the way he tried to destroy you. Constantive discovering me. Heart was pounding as I drove to the Thornwood family estate in Greenwich. The main house was a smaller property that Constance had owned separately from the manor, a place where she'd lived before moving to the nursing home. Harrison had never bothered to sell it, probably planning to do so after settling her affairs. I still had my old key. The house was dusty and silent, frozen in time. I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, my legs shaking, clutching the small brass key Constance had left me. The trunk was exactly where she described it, covered in dust and cobwebs. The key turned smoothly in the lock, and when I lifted the lid, I guessed inside were dozens of folders, each meticulously labeled with dates spanning decades. I pulled out the first one, dated 1985, the year before Harrison and I met. It was a police report. Harrison Thornwood, each 24, arrested for assault. The case had been dismissed after the Thornwood family made a substantial donation to the victim's family and the local police department. I grabbed another folder, financial documents showing Harrison had embezzled $1 million from his own father's company in 1993. Constance had covered it up. Another evidence that Harrison had plagiarized his Harvard senior thesis. Constance had paid off the professor. There were dozens of these folders, spanning decades. Each one documented a crime, a scandal, a betrayal that the Thornwood family had buried with their money and influence. But 3 folders made my blood run cold. The first, dated 2020, contained proof that Harrison had been having an affair with Amber, the paralegal, for not 3 years, as he'd admitted, but nearly 4. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was that Amber wasn't just any paralegal. She was Gerald Pemberton's niece, Harrison's lawyer's niece, the same lawyer who destroyed me in court. The collusion was obvious. Pemberton had helped Harrison set me up from the inside, probably feeding him strategy to ensure I'd lose everything. It was a conflict of interest so egregious that it would invalidate the entire divorce proceedings. The second folder contained financial records proving Harrison had been systematically hiding assets throughout our marriage. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, properties in other names, investments hidden behind shell corporations. The fortune I'd been told we'd built together, he'd been stealing from it for decades, squirreling away money where I'd never find it. The actual marital estate wasn't worth $8 million, as claimed in court. It was worth over $47 million. But the third folder was dynamite. It contained evidence that in 1998, Harrison had been involved in a drunk driving accident that killed a young woman named Rebecca Martinez, a 23-year-old mother of 2. Harrison had been driving home from a business dinner, drunk, and had run a red light. Rebecca died at the scene. The Thornwood family had paid off the police investigators, the medical examiner, and Rebecca's grieving husband. They framed the accident as mechanical failure. Rebecca's husband, desperate and drowning in medical debt from his wife's funeral, had accepted a settlement of $500,000 in exchange for his silence. Harrison had quite literally gotten away with murder, and Constance had kept every single document, every payoff receipt, every piece of evidence. She'd been insurance, I realized. She'd kept this evidence to control her son, to make sure he never crossed her. But in the end, she'd chosen to give it to me. The confrontation, he spent the next week making copies of everything. I consulted with Dorothy, who nearly fell out of her chair when she saw what I'd found. She immediately contacted the Connecticut Bar Association about Pemberton's conflict of interest and began preparing motions to invalidate the divorce. But I wanted more than just my assets back. I wanted Harrison to pay for everything he'd done, not just to me, but to Rebecca Martinez and her family. On September 28, 2023, I walked into Harrison's office at Thornwood Financial Group. His secretary tried to stop me, but I brushed past her and threw open the door to his private office. Harrison looked up from his desk, his expression shifting from surprise to annoyance. Marguerite, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to. Shut up. I'd never spoken to him like that in 37 years of marriage. The shock on his face was almost worth everything I'd been through. I found your mother's trunk. The color drained from his face. What trunk? I don't know what you're. Don't. I placed a folder on his desk. This is just a copy. I have the original somewhere safe, along with copies that will go to the police, the district attorney, and the Connecticut Bar Association if anything happens to me. His hands trembled as he opened the folder. I watched him scan the documents, the financial fraud, the hidden assets, and finally, the evidence of Rebecca Martinez's death. Where did you get these? He whispered, your mother. Turns out she hated what you'd become even more than she disliked me. I leaned forward, my hands flat on his desk. Here's what's going to happen. Harrison, you're going to contact your lawyer, you're unethical, corrupt liar, and you're going to instruct him to file new divorce papers. Papers that give me 60% of the actual marital estate, including the manor. You're going to issue public apologies to me and our children for your manipulation. And you're going to establish a trust fund of $5 million for Rebecca Martinez's children, who are now adults and still struggling financially because their mother was killed by a drunk driver who was never held accountable. You can't prove. I can prove all of it. Every single piece of evidence is documented, dated, and verified. The statute of limitations hasn't expired on the vehicular manslaughter. Harrison, you could still go to prison. You probably should go to prison. I straightened up. But I'm not a cruel person. Unlike you. Do what I've asked, and these documents stay sealed. Refuse, and I'll destroy you so completely that you'll wish I'd just turned you into the police. The children will know the truth about who their father really is. I have evidence of how you manipulated them, coached them, lied to them. They're going to hate you, Harrison, just like I do. The reckoning. Harrison didn't have a choice, and he knew it. Within a week, his lawyer filed a motion to set aside the divorce judgment based on newly discovered evidence of fraud and misconduct. Gerald Pemberton was suspended from practicing law pending investigation into the conflict of interest with his niece. The court proceedings moved quickly. Judge Matthews, upon reviewing the evidence of Harrison's hidden assets and the collusion between Harrison and his attorney, was furious. He ordered a complete forensic accounting of all Thornwood assets. On November 17, 2023, we were back in court for the new settlement hearing. This time, Harrison sat defeated at his table while I sat confidently at mine. Judge Matthews delivered his ruling. In my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen such a calculated, malicious attempt to defraud a spouse. Mr. Thornwood, you systematically hid assets, colluded with your attorney, and manipulated your own children to perpetrate a fraud on this court. Mrs. Thornwood is awarded 60% of the marital estate, including primary residence at Thornwood Manor. Additionally, Mr. Thornwood will pay spousal support of $25,000 per month for the rest of Mrs. Thornwood's life. Furthermore, Mr. Thornwood is ordered to establish a trust fund as described in the settlement agreement. The actual marital estate was worth $47 million. 60% was over $28 million, plus the manor. I'd gone from having $180,000 and nothing else to being wealthier than I'd ever imagined. But the money wasn't the sweetest part. The aftermath. Rebecca Martinez's revelation couldn't be kept quiet. Someone in the courthouse leaked the documents to the press, and within days, Harrison's drunk driving cover-up was front-page news. The Connecticut District Attorney, facing public pressure, reopened the investigation. While the statute of limitations had technically expired on vehicular manslaughter, Harrison faced charges for obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit fraud crimes with no statute of limitations when they involve covering up a death. In March 2024, he was convicted and sentenced to 6 years in prison. Thornwood Financial Group collapsed within months. Investors fled, clients canceled contracts, and Harrison's reputation was destroyed. The company he'd inherited from his father, the legacy he'd valued above everything, was liquidated to pay legal fees and restitution. As for my children, the truth was harder for them to swallow. I invited each of them to lunch separately and showed them the evidence, not the criminal matters, but the documents proving how their father had manipulated them against me. The coached testimony, the lies he'd told them about my mental state, the way he'd systematically turned them into weapons against their own mother. Victoria broke down in tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry. He told us you were having a breakdown, that we needed to support him in the divorce to protect you from yourself. I thought I was helping you." Marcus was angry at his father, at himself, at the situation. "He used us. He made us complicit in destroying you." Sophie, my youngest, simply held my hand and whispered, "I knew something was wrong. I should have trusted my instincts." I forgave them. They were victims too, in their way. It took time, but slowly we began rebuilding our relationship. Victoria and her husband moved into one of the manor's guest cottages. Marcus started a new business with my financial backing, determined to build something honest. Sophie opened an art studio in town. As for Amber, the paralegal who'd been part of Harrison's betrayal, she was fired from Pemberton's firm once the affair became public. She tried to publish a tell-all book about Harrison, but no publisher would touch it. Last I heard, she'd moved to California and changed her name. Gerald Pemberton was disbarred and faces potential criminal charges for his role in the fraud. His career is over, and I moved back into Thornwood Manor on January 15, 2020 for exactly 10 months after Harrison had thrown me out. But I didn't move back as the same woman who'd left. I was stronger, wealthier, and finally free. I redecorated the entire house, erasing every trace of Harrison's presence. His study, where I'd caught him with Amber, became my library. The formal dining room where we'd entertained his business associates became an art gallery featuring Sophie's work. The master bedroom got a complete overhaul. I also tracked down Rebecca Martinez's children, Carlos, now 27, and Maria, now 25. They'd grown up without their mother, struggling financially while the man who killed her lived in luxury. I met them at a coffee shop in Hartford on February 10th, 2024. "I'm sorry for what my husband did to your mother," I told them, tears streaming down my face. I didn't know. If I had known, I would have gone to the police myself years ago. Carlos, a kind-eyed man who looked like his mother in the photos I'd seen, took my hand. "You're not responsible for what he did, Mrs. Thornwood. But thank you for making sure he finally faced consequences." The trust fund I'd forced Harrison to establish would provide them each with $2.5 million, plus ongoing educational support for any future children. It wouldn't bring their mother back, but it was something. Lessons learned sitting in my library now, exactly 1 year after finding that dusty envelope in Constance's attic. Thornwood Manor is once again filled with life. My children visit regularly, bringing my 3 grandchildren. Victoria and I have coffee every Sunday morning. Marcus asks my advice on business decisions. Sophie painted a portrait of me that hangs in the entrance hall. People ask me if I'm bitter. The answer is complicated. Am I angry that I lost 37 years to a man who never truly loved me? Yes. Am I frustrated that our society often sides with wealthy men over their wives? Absolutely. Do I wish I'd seen the signs earlier? Every single day. But I'm also grateful for Constance's unexpected mercy, grateful that the truth finally came out, grateful for a legal system that, despite its flaws, eventually delivered justice, grateful for second chances. I've learned some valuable lessons through this ordeal. First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong in your relationship, it probably is. I ignored years of little warning signs. Harrison's increasing emotional distance, his frequent late nights at the office, the way he undermined my opinions in front of the children. I told myself I was being paranoid or insecure. I wasn't. My gut knew the truth before my mind accepted it. Second, protect yourself financially. I gave up my career to support Harrison's, I let him handle all our finances. I trusted him completely. That was a mistake. Every woman should maintain her own bank account, keep copies of financial documents, and understand the family's complete financial picture. Love doesn't mean blind trust. Third, document everything. When things started falling apart, I wish I'd kept better records of Harrison's behavior, his absences, the changes in our relationship. Constance's documentation saved me, but I should have been keeping my own. Fourth, don't underestimate the power of patience and strategy. When Harrison first betrayed me, I wanted to lash out immediately. Instead, I waited, gathered evidence, and struck when I had everything I needed. Revenge is a dish best served cold, as they say, but justice is a dish best served methodically. Fifth, people can surprise you. Constance Thornwood was never kind to me. She made my life difficult for decades. But in the end, she did the right thing. She chose justice over family loyalty. Sometimes redemption comes from the unlikeliest sources. Finally, you're stronger than you think. At 61, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never recover from losing everything. But I did more than recover, I thrived. Age is just a number. It's never too late to start over, to fight back, to reclaim your life. Where they are no Harrison is currently serving his sentence at Cheshire Correctional Institution. He'll be eligible for parole in 2028. But given the nature of his crimes and the media attention, parole is unlikely. I don't visit him. I don't write to him. As far as I'm concerned, the man I married died long before his arrest. Victoria just made partner at her law firm, a different firm than her father's. Obviously, she specializes in family law now, representing women in divorce proceedings. She says I inspired her to help others in similar situations. Marcus's new business, an ethical investment firm, is thriving. He's donated significant amounts to organizations that support victims of domestic abuse and financial fraud. He says it's his way of making amends for what our family did. Sophie's art is gaining recognition. She recently had a gallery show in New York City titled Truth and Consequences, featuring paintings inspired by our family's story. Critics call it hauntingly beautiful and devastatingly honest. As for me, I've started a foundation called the Second Chances Project, which provides legal aid and financial support to women going through difficult divorces. I've also written a book about my experience. It's being published next spring by a major publishing house. All proceeds will go to the foundation. I've even started dating again. His name is Robert. He's a retired professor, and he makes me laugh. We take things slowly, and I'm not sure where it will lead. But for the first time in decades, I'm hopeful about the future. The final word every time I walk through the halls of Thornwood Manor now. I remember the woman I was a year ago, broken, defeated, convinced her life was over. And then I look at the woman I've become, strong, independent, surrounded by family who truly loves me. That dusty envelope didn't just save my life, it gave me a new one. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Constance hadn't left me those documents. Harrison would have gotten away with everything: the affair, the fraud, covering up Rebecca's death, destroying me in court. He would have lived out his days in luxury while I struggled in poverty. But that's not what happened. Justice, delayed though it was, finally prevailed. I keep Constance's letter in a frame in my library, not because I want to remember the pain, but because I want to remember that even in our darkest moments, unexpected help can come, even from people we never expected to be our allies. To anyone reading this who's going through something similar, whether it's betrayal, divorce, financial abuse, or any kind of injustice, please know this: you are not alone. You are not powerless, and you are not defeated unless you choose to be. Document everything. Seek help from professionals you trust. Protect yourself financially. Don't let shame or fear keep you silent. And most importantly, never give up fighting for what's rightfully yours. My name is Marguerite Adelaide Thornwood. I lost my $3.5 million mansion, my children's trust, and 37 years of my life to a man who never deserved me. But I found a dusty envelope that changed everything. And now, I'm living the best revenge of all. A happy, authentic, meaningful life. The truth always comes out eventually. Sometimes, it just needs a little help from an unexpected source. Epilogue. 1 year later, it's September 12th, 2024, and I'm standing in the attic of what used to be Constance's house. I've decided to convert it into offices for the Second Chances project. As workers prepare to renovate, I take one last look at the spot where the old drink sat, covered in dust and cobwebs. "Thank you, Constance," I whisper to the empty room. "You weren't kind to me in life, but you gave me the most important gift anyone could give, the truth." As I turn to leave, sunlight streams through the attic window, illuminating the dusty air and creating patterns of light and shadow on the old wooden floor. It's beautiful in its way, the space where my salvation was hidden for so long. I think about all the women out there right now who are where I was a year ago, lost, scared, convinced they have no options. I think about how many of them might never find their own dusty envelope, their own evidence of the truth. That's why the work of the foundation matters so much. That's why I share my story, despite how painful and personal it is. Because maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to hear that there's hope, that justice is possible, that you can lose everything and still come back stronger. I leave the attic and climb down the stairs for the last time. My phone buzzes with a text from Victoria. "Sunday brunch at the manor. The kids want to see Grandma." I smile and text back, "Can't wait. I'll make my famous blueberry pancakes." This is my life now. Not perfect, but authentic. Not painless, but purposeful. Not what I expected, but exactly what I needed. And it all started with a dusty envelope and a woman's final act of conscience. Sometimes the end is really just the beginning.